Welcome to the Voices of Manufacturing, where business leaders across the country share their unique challenges and insights.
We want to help people within manufacturing and make them excited to come to work every day and go home safe to their family.
When you bring people in, they're anything but a machine. They're partners that can help you build your business, that can be your success if you treat them right.
It's almost like magic because it takes the learning process sometimes from weeks down to days, sometimes hours.
This podcast is brought to you by Dazuki, the premier frontline digital transformation solution that allows manufacturers to standardize operations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian Salee and Michael Mullenberg.
Michael, I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but we seem to be on this streak where each guest that we bring on is somewhat connected to the previous guest, whether it's the topic or they knew each other. And this episode is actually a great continuation from our last conversation. You know, we were talking about leading through growth, and you were sharing some of your insights about the things companies need to do as they're going through these growth phases. And the topic today just seems to fit perfectly with that, because I couldn't imagine a tool that could be more useful at a time when you're going through really, really fast growth and you need to get aligned as an organization. Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit more about this tool and our guest today?
Yeah, well, when I mentioned last episode about returning to fundamentals, this is one of the methodologies, one of the tools, one of the thought processes that I had in mind. And just thrilled that Karen Martin can be with us today. I've read her books. I've known her as an author for quite a long time, but we finally met in person a year ago. And just every little story and every little bit of wisdom just gets me excited to be on this transformational journey. So we're so happy to have her here today. Karen, welcome. First of all, great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you
And
for
we
inviting me to see
we
you all.
both survived AME Cleveland this year. That was really fun.
That was very fun.
And there was
And
consistent.
to relax and sleep and recharge. That was a lot of energy there. It was great.
Well, there was with the conference, and every time I looked over at your booth, there was a line around around the corner. So obviously, you were attracting a lot of attention. I think what I took away was a lot of people are looking for wisdom, for shortcuts, for what's new. People are growing; they want to stretch, they want to develop, and so what a great place to do that and connect with some of the thought leaders.
The great
Um,
conference.
yeah. So, well, for our episodes, I want to have you kind of introduce yourself. I mean, I know you kind of as an author, and I consider you a friend now. But tell us what is it you actually do? You got your hands in a lot of things these days.
Sh- No, it's like the question my family asks me about twice a year. What do you do?
Yeah,
And the joke is she's CIA. Because no one can understand what we do. But there must be something top secret. But no, it's not. It's just improvement. And leadership development and organizational performance improvement and all those things. So we have now two companies. So there's the longstanding TKMG Inc. is the new name, which used to be the Karen Martin Group. So TKMG Inc., the consulting arm. And then 4 years ago, 2 weeks after the lockdown began, we launched our second company, which is the online learning platform TKMG Academy. And it was rough go because people really tightened their budgets right away and things like that. But we are finally, this year's been amazing. So it's finally doing well. But it was our attempt to kind of put our consulting in a bottle, of course, and offer it more, it could get spread around the globe much more easily than us flying all over the place. I still love to fly all over the place, but there's so many needs. There's so many, learning and development needs, and people, don't have all the skill sets they need to be highly successful. And so it was our way to extend our reach, in an alternative way that might be helpful.
yeah, and as a new generation of lean leaders and continuous improvement people are emerging, what a perfect timing. Some of the tools are 20, 40, 50, maybe even 100 years old. So your timing seems pretty good despite the pandemic start.
Yeah. Hope so. I mean, so far it seems like it's serving what it was supposed to do. So it's good.
Absolutely. Well, Brian and I have been talking with guests and obviously visiting companies, and we've been hearing this theme about rapid growth and, really trying to get their house in order. And so this return to fundamentals is a theme that just keeps coming up, and people are not super familiar with the tools, or they're relaunching. And so we wanted to bring you on and talk about value stream transformation, all the tools, all the concepts kind of under that umbrella. So just in your words, what is value stream transformation?
So, value stream transformation is taking a look at the entire work system that it takes to deliver value to customers. And they could be internal customers, but most of the time we're talking about an external customer. We use the term sometimes a support value stream or a value enabling value stream when it's an internal customer, like say the HR hiring and onboarding value stream is one of the most important value streams there is, possibly more important than the operational value streams. And so there's this value enabling and then value delivering. There are two different, aspects of value being delivered. And the work system element of it is what is so critical, because a lot of people do get confused between process level mapping and process level analysis and value stream perspective. And it's important to understand it's not one, clear line between the two. It's a continuum. But there's, definitely macro and micro needs of an organization. And those two types of mapping fulfill those two needs, strategic versus tactical.
Karen, I saw one of your examples you had in one of your presentations, and it helped me really, from a visual standpoint, really understand the difference. You had an overview of I think it was like a freeway, and you had all the different freeways where they intersect, and that was kind of the macro. And then the micro was, you're on the freeway, and all you can see is cars. You're really in the process, and so
Right.
that was a great example to help understand. But when is the right time to use which tool, I guess, is something that comes up, and I hear from people a lot is they get too granular, or
Yeah.
maybe at times they're too zoomed out.
Yeah. So, good question. And it's not a real simple answer, but one of the ways to think about it is that you need to get into the process when you're, for example, starting to get your arms around a standardized way of working and documenting standard work. You have to get to the process level for that, that you really can't do that from a value stream perspective. It's too high. On the other hand, the reason why value stream perspectives are more helpful before you get to process level is that much of the time leadership they're not aligned on priorities or even the way to go about making an improvement that needs to be made at a high level. So the value stream work and the conversations they have enable, if it's well facilitated, it enables them to come to consensus more quickly, so that the teams, it's almost like passing the baton in a relay race. Once the baton gets passed after value stream work to the next level down in the organization, then they can just zoom and start getting results and not have someone go, hey, whoa, what's Joe doing over there? Why is he doing that? What's Sally doing? Why is she doing that? Because they've already had that conversation. So it's really, I say this all the time. It's not about the map. It's really about the transformation plan that results from the map. And to get to the transformation plan, it's really about the conversations and decisions and consensus building that leads to the plan, which then gets executed. So it's nice to, in fact, the book that we wrote, Value Stream Mapping, we fought like the Dickens to not have mapping be in the title. Like, we did not want this to be about mapping, because that's not going to make people successful. As Mike, you said something about wallpaper when we were talking before we started the podcast, and oh my goodness, if I had a dime for every map I saw on a wall that had nothing behind it as far as results went, um, you know, I might be in Tahiti. So it's important that the map is the means to have the right conversations, reach consensus, and then take action.
Yeah, well, that's key. Well, and I've done my share of maps that ended up as wallpaper, and done my share of maps where the leadership would say, "Well, we knew all that." There were no surprises, there were no learnings. So walk us through the process. What are the steps of the mapping, and what are the things to look for sort of at each phase, so that we don't end up in that trap?
Yeah, so I've actually had the opposite experience where leaders, many, many, many times during a mapping activity. And they usually last 3 days, sometimes four if it's a very complex value stream. They'll say, like, I had no idea. Oh my gosh, I had no idea. And I love that because it's giving them a slice of looking at work through a lens that they've never had. It's like, being half blind and then getting a pair of glasses in and that suddenly restores your vision and you're like, "Oh my goodness, didn't see this." And so I love that part of it. So the first thing is you got to start with the charter. We are charter fanatics. Most people at first glance don't understand what it actually is. It's not just a scoping device. It's not just a clarification device on who's going to be on the team. It's really a conversation tool to make sure that everyone understands why. Why are we doing this? What do we hope to achieve from this? How are we going to know if we did well? How are we going to measure success? What are the possible barriers to success? How do we mitigate them up front? Or what do we do if they appear? The chartering process, yeah, it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper if you print it one monitor, it looks like an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, but it's so much more than an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And most organizations undervalue the time it takes to get a well-crafted charter together. And they don't necessarily understand you have to go slow to go fast. And taking the time to plan and plan well will pay off in droves as far as the depth the team can get to and the speed at which they can get there.
I could see that without the charter really helps get people aligned. I could definitely see that. Who typically takes on that role? Is it someone in leadership or someone more in the operations role? And I guess today we're speaking mostly about manufacturing since that's
Sure.
most of our audience.
Yeah, so we like to have a very small core team, 2 to 5 people max. The executive sponsor, there's always an executive sponsor, and vice president or above. Often C level, depending on the size of the organization. But if it's a very large organization, it's usually a VP level. So they're in the first call at least, if not all of the planning calls. And then, maybe the VP of operations or, sometimes a manager is a high level. The name of the roles do vary so much from organization to organization, but it's someone who's going to actually be accountable for the results. And then, a couple of key functions within the value stream, maybe some of the functions that seem to be more ripe for some major improvement or change in what they're doing and how they're doing it. They might be on the core team. Certainly the facilitator, which, in our case is us, as outside facilitators. But if a company wants to take it on themselves, then certainly the facilitator that they're going to be using to do the mapping should be in those are early calls as well.
Yeah, I love your emphasis on that leadership support. Again, I think that was one of our failure modes is, we didn't have VPs saying, hey, we want to be involved in the charter, and really interpreting the map and, discovering. And the other thing is you mentioned, maybe up to 3 days for a complex process is I think when we first learned the tool, everybody got in a hurry. Let's just get through this as fast as we can and get back to work.
Mhm.
And there wasn't as much revelation when maybe you skipped a couple of, walks of the process. You just drew what you thought was the map and said, well, that's what I think. I don't see any opportunities. But if you went and saw it, you might, the map might guide you to where the hidden secret is. And you might have a little bit more awareness of the problem that at hand.
The walks are critical, and we sometimes walk twice, not just once. Depends on the value stream and what problems they want to solve. And it also depends a little bit on logistics and whether or not people spread out all over the globe that are in the value stream or whether they're in one location. Certainly easier when everyone's all in one location.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that the data, this was my revelation and my learning was I learned value stream mapping in 2002 and started, going out to organizations of all kinds, mainly manufacturing in the beginning, but then eventually all kinds of industries. And I brought a guy into the TKMG team from McKinsey, and he was one of the ones that was a really authentic, organic growth kind of guy as far as lean goes. He was got his hands dirty. He was one of those really early lean people that got it and was very good at it, is very good at it. And we were at a client and he said, "So aren't we going to have a data ask?" And I said, "Oh, that's so McKinsey of you." And we were joking. And then I was like, I'm serious. Like there's timestamps in the computer. Why should we take up all their time guessing about what the lead time is when we have data that will tell us what the lead time is from one operation to the next? And I was like, well, that's kind of genius. I mean, this is like 5 years in, right? And so, he led the data ask and I learned, oh my goodness, like that is crazy that we haven't been using data all along. And so now data is a big part of the ahas. And so even if there's some reason why you can't walk the value stream, there's some logistical constraint in the way, the data is often what makes leaders go, "Wow, we had no idea." Because the when you look at things through an improvement lens with data, it's you see all kinds of gaps that need to be closed. So it's I can't overemphasize the need to get good data.
And
Yeah.
Karen, I'm curious, when you think about data, what is the data that makes a leader or somebody who's involved in this process just sit back and go, wow, I never realized this. Is it, customer places an order and then the time between when that order is received until they start working on the product for the customer? What are kind of those aha moments that happen when you look at that data?
That's definitely one. I mean, that is a common one. It's often just also like just the total lead time and not understanding the timing of an order. And some of that's just naivete in the measurement acumen that the organization has, and immaturity in understanding how to use data and how to gather it and do something with it. So another thing is demand. It is stunning how many organizations don't even understand the daily demand or monthly demand facing them and the demand variation. And when leaders start looking at the ding, 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 in demand, everything, and you wonder why it feels chaotic, and you wonder why staffing is so dang hard and why production schedules are so dang hard, to get right. This is it. So let's figure out if there's any way to level demand coming in, and then certainly level it once the demand's there, certainly level all the operations that you can within that work system. And so that's what I also had one where they were using 5-year-old assumptions about demand and when demand peaks occurred, and the timing on the demands had shifted significantly. It was a gradual shift, but from 5 years ago to the day we were working with them, it had shifted significantly, but the scheduling never shifted. And so, they were wondering why they either had too many people sitting around with no demand, or they couldn't meet demand because it was coming in like Lucy in the Chocolate Factory. And it was because they were using just old data, old assumptions that wasn't current.
I think the original value streaming mapping, book said, go get these data elements, changeover, yield, inventory, all these different things. Didn't really talk much about the variation. Didn't talk about plotting it, looking at, seasonality, and so that was our revelation as well. Not only the demand, but you'd go out and observe a changeover or look at a pile of inventory and say, well, that's interesting. That's what it is today. But then you pull the data and you find out that that was an anomaly, or
Right.
maybe the yield was good that day because everybody knew you were watching them. And
Right.
so you have to really, maybe walk the value stream a couple times, pull the data, take into account the variation.
Yeah, we usually pull data over a pretty long time period to try to
Right.
uncover as much variation as we can. I mean, some of the files we get from clients are like 40 gigs. There's a big files. And also the other thing that I think organizations don't do well is in getting the right data that they need. So when I say by that, what I mean by that is what you need is raw data so that you can manipulate it any way you need to understand the truth about the current state. And oftentimes, organizations have done these canned reports that maybe they made sense. Most of the time, I find canned reports are way, way lacking in meaningful information from an improvement perspective, way lacking. And so, every time we start with a client, they want to give us these canned reports. And every time I try to play nice and say, okay, sure, give me your canned report. Let's see. I'm like, now this is what we need. This is what we need. I need raw data. And so, I mean, I don't think I've had an exception where a canned report gave the team everything they needed. It's not just, what I need, it's what the team needs. It's actually
Yeah.
not about me. I'm just guiding, the ask and doing the work because they're learning how to do it. So, yeah, it's really important to get raw data, no calculations, no formatting, no nothing, so that you can do anything you want with it.
And Karen, a couple follow-up questions for you here. So we talked about, kind of we're going through this linear flow for, if you're going to do value stream mapping, you get the charter going, figure out who's going to be involved, timelines, goals. This data pool, does this happen? Is this part of as you're developing the charter, you're also okay.
Yeah, I mean,
And
you have
then,
to go clear first so that you know for sure what you're going to be focused on,
yes,
or you know for sure what the problems are, at least the perceived problems are in the value stream, so that you are asking for the right data that will shine a light on those areas.
got it. And I guess one question we didn't get to when we think about the charter, who's involved? We talked about leadership's involved, and I guess how many people do you involve in this? Like, I always go back to if it's, it takes more than one pizza to feed the team if the team's too big. Is it that type of situation?
So we are rarely 100% rigid on anything, but we are extremely rigid on no more than 10. Period. End of story. We've tried 11 multiple times. We've tried 12 multiple times, 13, 14, 15. Like, it just doesn't work. I mean, 10 is the magic number, and ideally 6 to 8. In manufacturing, it's easier to keep the team smaller if you're only doing a production value stream, only analyzing a production value stream. If you're getting into enterprise value streams that involve product development and supply chain and possibly revenue collection on the back end and warranty work, those are big and there's a lot of departments involved. So that, you almost always have at least 10, or not at least 10. I'm sorry. I
Yes.
flipped. I slipped into 10 years ago. Or 10, 10
10.
only.
10 is the
10,
number.
10. 10 is
And
enough.
and when you pull those 10 people, you're trying to figure out who to involve. I mean, obviously, you're looking for people who are eager, want to participate. I imagine.
Not
What are not always? No.
not only.
Okay.
You know who I love having on the team is the one person everyone says is a jerk. They're like, oh, I don't, he never agrees with anything. He's so surly, blah, blah, blah. And the minute I hear that, I'm like, I want this person on the team. Absolutely.
Mhm.
And you know what? My experience has been literally 100% of the time, they're right. Whatever they're complaining about, they're right. They may not have a great method for complaining, but they're right. And second of all, it heals so many relationships in the process of doing this work because people finally see that this person's right and this person finally gets heard and they finally see action about the thing that has been problematic all along. And so that part of it is, a beautiful thing to see everyone come together and kind of, decide to work nice with each other from now on because he was right. She was right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's a huge benefit of the process. I love bringing in the different disciplines because sometimes they don't really talk, they don't cooperate. This gets them in the same room. And then I love
yeah.
your idea of having the antagonist, the grumpy one, the one that's got all the complaints, because first of all, you get a chance to turn them around, and
Mhm.
and maybe have a little more positive outcome. But yeah, they usually are right, and they're going to call a spade a spade.
Yep.
And maybe they didn't even need the map to do it, but they're there and they're mapping, and so yeah, this collaboration. And have you had teams where you've had like infighting where you
Oh,
know
oh, yeah.
turf wars, and hey, we don't want to do it this way, and I use a different template and I use Visio, and we talked about the tool itself, even people arguing about the tool.
No, so we don't. There's no tool when we do mapping. There's paper and post-its. So it's afterwards that we put things into electronic format for just easier archiving and distribution and things like that. So and the other thing is let's talk about the word tool. Like, I actually don't use the word tool hardly at all anymore. I have it for many, 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 many years. Value stream mapping is a method. It's a practice. It's an approach. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of improving. I mean, you can call it anything I shy away from the word tool
Yeah.
because it minimizes its power. It seems to make it like this perfunctory thing that you can argue about. And, you can't argue about value stream thinking. It's I mean, why would you argue?
Yeah.
We should think holistically. Isn't that kind of a And so back to your question though about, the infighting. Um, you know, Usually it's not horrendous until the future state. Current state is kind of factual. There's nothing to really argue about. They may have different perceptions and different, they may have, misunderstandings about the current state, but then through doing the current state work, you actually are uncovering the
Yeah.
truth about the situation. And so, that usually isn't where it gets a little, spicy, as I call it.
Yeah.
It's future state map where people have different visions of how to achieve what has to happen. What we try really hard to keep the team focused on is not the how, but the what. So if the transformation plan, I'm skipping ahead now to the transformation plan, which in our case, we start with just an Excel sheet with lines, and each line is a Kaizen burst or, some activity that needs to occur. They should mostly be framed as problems to be solved. So we're not getting into how to solve that problem in the mapping activity. It's just uncovering the need for and then the prioritization of those gaps to be closed. And not all of them get solved. I mean, if your cycle for improvement is say 6 to 9 months, you know, depending on how much opportunity there is within the value stream, you probably can't get to all of them in that time period. So the prioritization part of it becomes really essential, so that the team isn't getting jerked around and they have, a clear path to making a better value stream, getting better flow.
Yeah. I love that focus on the how, or, not the how, but the what. What is the problem? And
Hmm.
not saying, hey, I need to put my project on that map. They've already got a solution and a project in mind. And just, hey, let's just talk about the problem for a little bit. That seems to buffer that quite well.
Yeah,
Like,
it really does. And I want to go back, Brian, to something you were starting to say. I interrupted you and said, no, bring them on the team. The cantankerous one. I would say, what, 10 of those types of people,
Yes. Yeah.
you do want the people that are, more interested in looking at work and have a little more of an open mind toward the fact that, the operation is currently functioning the way it's currently functioning because of some set of decisions that were made at some point, and conditions may very well have changed since those decisions were made. That process may have made total sense and been genius when it was developed, but now conditions have changed. It's time to think about work a little differently. And, sometimes people don't embrace this thought that batching isn't necessarily a great thing. And the opposite, batching isn't always bad either. So, so there's new learning that happens as well.
Well, let's keep moving along this kind of linear path here. We talked about the charter, the data pool. What comes next? What's kind of step 2 or step 3 here?
So typically we walk the value stream as early in the process. Once we have the team together and we're starting our, 3 days together, whatever. Oh, I want to go back to one more thing. I'm sorry. I do hear from people all the time. I mean, more often than not, I hear, I don't know how you get this level of leader to sit in a room for 3 days.
Yes.
And so here's a couple things. So honestly, being an outside consultant that's being paid a decent amount of money, there is, people take us seriously because they're investing. And so I feel bad when internal people have tried to get that same leadership team together to do some mapping, and they've been unsuccessful. But I also have a lot of ways. I've been doing this so long. I have a lot of ways to get leaders to see that there is indeed value in them coming into that room for 3 days and blocking out the rest of the world and being able to focus on one thing and getting one thing done well, and not having the interruptions, and just getting the continuity of thinking and all of those things done, which it would take 8 months to get through if you let normal life be the driving force. And then the other thing is that never had a leadership team end a mapping activity and say, well, that was a big old waste of time. Never. There's so much learning, especially if you're at the right level. You have to make sure you're really at a value stream level. And you have to make sure that you're talking about strategy, organizational strategy a lot as you're doing the value stream work so that they stay engaged at a leadership level, which is where they should be.
Yeah.
So, that helps a lot to be able to do that. But, you know, getting leaders to agree, I mean, you have to explain the why and you have to be compelling in explaining the why because they do have a lot of competing priorities and pools and friction that they have to deal with and things like that. So it's, you have to sell it,
Do you,
baby.
do you find that your clients are, when they're trying to get, an executive leader on board potentially, are they trying to, solve a problem is how they're presenting it? Like, this is a real pain. We've been, missing our targets or whatever it might be. We're not hitting our attack time. Um, are they framing it that way, or is it more framing about what the future could look like?
Well, I don't know what they say when I'm not present. When I'm in the mix, it's all about the gap to be closed. So it's about the current state and not thinking about the future yet, other than the promise. I do believe very much that people love having hope, and they are more engaged when they have hope. Now, if the hopes get dashed, then you've kind of gone back 4 steps. But so you have to follow through on that hope trajectory, and deliver. But people do like to have some hope. So one thing you can do in the beginning is, be clear about the pain of the current state and then just, talk about the hope that that pain goes away, and the promise that that pain can go away. And that sometimes helps. I mean,
That
leaders want to sleep at night. They don't
Yeah,
want to worrying about deliveries not being missed and partial shipments and customers calling and not getting paid and the myriad things that happen and equipment downtime and they don't want to think about that. So usually it's pretty if you find out what their pain is and if there's a direct tie with the value stream that people want to look at, it's easy.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense just from, the way people think. We're much more motivated by pain than gain. So,
Absolutely.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yep. Yep. So continuing the trajectory, walking and then mapping. And then after current state, which I'm kind of making this seem really simple. Current state's not easy. There's a lot to, and you have to be careful you don't get into the weeds. So I always feel like I'm pulling people out of the weeds, and keeping them at the high level so we can progress. Once you get to the point where you have a pretty decent current state, decent enough to react to, that's the only purpose of the current state is to react and to, have a springboard for then designing the future state. And so we tend to do a little quick exercise where we say, okay, forget about the current state now. Now think about perfection. This is like it used to be called blue sky and nirvana. Some people call it and everything. I don't know if it's really blue sky or not, but it's just saying what would be ideal. And so in a manufacturing environment, they might say what would be ideal is 100% delivery on time. Equipment never goes down. There's never injuries. There's like you paint this picture of perfection, and then you have the current state. You now have this picture of perfection. I find that springboards the innovative thinking far better than not doing that step of what perfection looks like. And I'm talking 10 minutes, 15 minutes max. It's
Yeah.
not like an hour or two discussion. It's very, very fast. They go to the wall, whiteboard, flip chart, paper, whatever. And they're like, like, we want this. This is what would be ideal. We could go home, we'd be happy, and life would be good.
That
So,
seems like a really powerful exercise because Michael and I were we talk about this all the time. People get so rigid in their thinking,
mhm,
based on, past circumstances or resources or whatever. They live within these limitations that, they've been surrounded by for so long. And this exercise gets them to think, well, what if you didn't have those limitations?
mhm,
What could ideal look like? What could that future state look like? So
mhm.
I definitely could see how that'd be a powerful exercise. But you're saying it's only 10, 15 minutes to do
Yep.
this. How do you move so quickly through something like that and get people to,
Yeah.
you know, wipe away the, kind of preconceived, uh, thoughts about how things should be?
Well, you have to be convincing. but it's more than that. It's really forget about it. Forget about the current state. Like, just clear your brain of that. Like, we're going to brainwash, clear it out. What's perfection? Like, just forget about the current state. Define perfection. That's all I'm asking. And people know, like, boom, 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 what perfection looks like. It goes very, very fast. And you have to move them too. I keep like I speed up my speaking, and I go, good one, next, and to keep them accelerating, and that's how you can get it done really quickly.
Wow. Well, you're making me realize, I was hoping this is a methodology that, somebody could pick up and implement at their own company, but I'm seeing that the facilitator plays a really important role in this process because it is very complicated. There's a lot to it.
Well, it is. It doesn't mean that you can't try because I had a first mapping experience. Mike, my co-author, he had a first mapping experience, and we're not the same facilitators we were back then, thankfully. But you learn every time you facilitate, and so it doesn't mean you have to have. I'll tell you the one big advantage of having an outside facilitator, in addition to skill set and experience, is the objectivity. That's the one thing that when you're going to develop some internal resources to facilitate these things, man, they've got to be mature and they've got to really know how to check their ideas at the door. And they should be kind of not even part of the value stream, if you ask me, because it's too easy to get sucked into your knowledge of the value stream and your bias about how things should be. And especially with future state design. So that is the one big miss that a lot of organizations that only have internal facilitators, have to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah, maintaining that momentum that, you know the process so you can keep them moving along and keep them on that timeline as well as I like your, your cheerleader aspect, that was great. It's hard to do that if you're internal, I think. It's much
Mhm.
much easier. And then yeah, then asking the question, would it be great if, or what if we did it like this, or think about the ideal state or the nirvana, whatever phrase. You got to have somebody in the room that can talk like that.
Yeah. What would have to be true if? Da, da, da. And that's another
Yeah,
good question.
that's a great
What would
one.
have what would have to be true? And that way, it's not true today, but what would have to be true in order to
Mhm.
achieve that tomorrow? The other thing I was just thinking about is that on the future state, in addition to the skill in keeping people moving along and all of that, in the future state, it's the ability to see whether a team is grasping what's available to them. So a lot of times the people in the room don't even know what pull is. I mean, we teach them what pull versus push is, but they have never experienced it. So you have to sometimes show them options. It can never be your idea ultimately, but you have to show them the options and show them what pull could do, and then it's up to them to decide whether they want to try that for the future state or not. And so, that's one thing where when I started mapping in the very beginning, I didn't even have a good command of all of the kind of industrial engineering kinds of choices you have. It took me a while, to really understand when to push the batching and when not to, when to, turn to pull if possible, or not to, when to, um, work segmentation. When do you take work with variation and make two lines for it instead of merging them into one?
Yep.
There's just so much to consider. But again, at the value stream level, you don't have to make those decisions. All you have to decide is that you want to solve that problem,
Yep.
whatever that problem is.
Yeah. Well,
So
maybe
all
if,
of it later then. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I was just going to say that people get the practitioners probably get real excited about flow and pull, and maybe we've seen it, maybe we've got a theoretical model, and to bring your team along to sort of envision some of that future state is really a skill. I think you have to cast that vision somehow, show them, tell them, simulate
Mhm,
it. But then it's
mhm.
back to reality. It's like, well, yeah, the machine breaks down every hour, or the changeover's too long, or it's some of more of the blocking and tackling, and that's more of our reality. So is there an interim state that you talk about as well?
Yes. So it depends on the value stream on whether it can be pretty heavily transformed so I said 6 to 9 months earlier. We
Hmm.
typically look at that as being kind of the sweet spot for the
Yep.
plan. And the plan, when we're doing the future state design, it's designed with that time frame in mind.
Yep.
And most of the time, organizations they think they can bite off way more than they can chew. I'm like, do you know how fast 3 months goes in business? It's like, boom, and 3 months has passed. And so we have to be realistic on how much with all the other projects that are going on and all of that stuff. And so the problem with having it only 3 months is that you're going to get very little improvement done in 3 months. I mean, you can get something substantive, but if you're talking about transforming an entire work system, there's a lot to be done. The problem with 12 months is that people sometimes go, "Oh, we've got a year,"
Yeah.
and they're kind of like slacking in the beginning and getting distracted and everything. So 6 to 9 kind of has a bias toward action,
Yeah.
without it being too short to get something, a lot of things substantive done. So, and then the organization has to also face the music. If you want things done well and done more deeply, then you have to take things off of people's plates in order to, get the time freed up so that they can actually do the work. So, it's if you have strategy deployment in place and value stream transformation as part of the cascading down of what needs to be done in order to meet the strategy, then it has a much higher chance of getting resourced the way it needs to be resourced in order to get the results that need to be gotten.
Another reason why you need leadership involved
Yeah.
in this process. Karen, could we go back though? Because we hit on it very briefly, but mapping the current state. You said you're always having to pull people out. People are zooming in too much.
Mhm.
But what should they be focused on? Because what is the right level of detail as you're mapping out the current state?
So again, everything's a little situational, but the guidance we give is that the total map for a production only value stream map from order to delivery or shipping. So for that, no revenue, no warranty, no nothing, no product development, no supply chain stuff other than getting supplies in, but no developing the supply chain. Um, that if you have like from left to right, you could have some parallel steps and processes into place. But from left to right, linearly on the map, you shouldn't have more than like maybe 10 post-its, because the way to think about it is each post-it is a activity that then there's another post-it because there's a delay. So there's a delay in the middle of all post-its. If work's flowing, they all go on one post-it. So the break in the timeline is what just differentiates whether you need another post-it or not. So that break in the timeline could be the buildup of WIP, work in process. It could be a quality problem, so rework is going on. It could be resourcing, staffing problems. It could be equipment breakdowns. It could be long changeover. Whatever it might be. If there's a break in the timeline, that's kind of when you have another post-it. So you think 10-ish. For enterprise wide, we've had them go as big as 20. But usually that's a really big enterprise, like a greeting card company where the map was everything from ideation of a design all the way to it's in a store. You could go buy a card. That's how far we went. It was crazy, but it was good. It was really good.
So
Um, Go ahead.
it sounds like though this isn't so detailed to where, I don't have a post-it for every single work stream for a particular product. I'm summarizing work has started and I'm staying very high level. I'm not getting into those details that, well, maybe one component is, headed into polishing and paint and another component is over here in grinding. It's not at that level. That's more of a process map. Is that right?
It's usually operation. So grinding would be on it. And what was the
Okay.
first? And what was the first
Oh,
operation?
I gave an example like paint, paint would be polishing and paint.
Yeah, polish and paint would be a post-it. Yes, you're
Okay.
yeah, but you're not at every step that they do to do the polish and paint or to do
Yeah.
the grinding. So
Okay.
the operation is on the post-it.
That seems like the key piece to understand then. Like you do detail at that level, you just don't go into the detail. Well, like we're gonna, polish and we're gonna use this, particular pad and we're gonna polish for this long. And then it's gonna
Right.
go to quality to do a quick check on polishing. Um,
Well, another thing that we should mention, we could talk for 3, 4,
I
5 hours
know.
on There's so much. It's so fun. So when you're doing the charter, another part of the value of a charter is the scoping. And so, people often try to map too much variation. So we often will take, a product family. So it might be different SKUs going down the same line or the multiple lines, whatever it might be, but they're going through the same equipment, same staff, kind of, sort of, and all that stuff. That could be one map. Might be a map. It might not be two. It might need to be two maps. But when you get to the product family, then the reason why people go in the weeds is that when you get to, say, polish, they'll say, well, we have a problem with this, that, and the other thing. So it is important to understand at a high level what's causing lead time to be extended and what's causing, we call it process time. Some people call it cycle time. It's the touch time to do the work. What causes that to be extended? And then what's causing quality problems at that operation? You have to get to that level, but you have to stop at that understanding for the current state. And what people often want to do is they want to talk about, well, the problem with that is because of da, 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 and you have to move them on because you won't get the map done in enough time for the future state discussions. So that's the pulling people out of the weeds, is getting into that level of detail.
Yeah, I could see how this would be a challenge, especially with like a company. You said a product family with a lot of variation, right? Colors, components, you name it. Um, there's a lot of opportunities for things to go wrong when you have that much variation, and it's really easy to zoom in on those details. But what you're saying here is like still stay high level with those. You can pick out the problems, but how do you pick out the problems and not be so granular that you're picking out every problem for every, like when we make this variation of the product, this is the problem that happens. When we make this variation, this is the problem. How do you avoid getting, stuck in that?
Yeah. So oftentimes there isn't a whole lot of variation. So on a map, you can definitely have a little bit of branching, but it's not a Visio chart,
Right,
so it's not like yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. It's not that, so you can have a little bit of branching where one variant, like you can even have a variant goes through the next operation, then the next operation, and another variant skips that second operation and goes straight from 1 to 3. You could have stuff like that. And you can even have different lead times depending on the variants. But you want your map to be easy to understand and make sense and drive what it's supposed to do, is drive the future state design. So you don't need to know everything. And here's the interesting irony of doing mapping with really good scope. I'm going to go back to the green card experience. So when we did the charter, there were two variations that were on the charter that was going to be the map. The map was going to be any card that was considered an everyday card. So not special cards for Christmas and not special cards for Easter and all that, but everyday cards for birthdays and all that stuff. No more than two extra processes. So extra processes are ribbons, music, glitter, embossing, whatever. And when we got done with the current state, that list had extended to about 8 different variants that current state map represented. And that was because as we were going through the map, they would say, well, it depends. If it's this, it's that. And so we had to say, it's only everyday cards. It's only 2 operations. It's only when the moon is full. It's only I'm
Yeah.
on that. But it's like all these, and that current state only represented 10% of their business.
Yeah.
And leaders got very nervous about that. Like, oh, that's only 10% of our business. Like, why are we paying this woman to come in here and do 10% of our business? But the future state, and this happens all the time. It's just the magic of doing this work. When you have that real narrow focus, you can see almost always the same patterns that all work has. And when you design a future state for that very narrow set of circumstances, it actually usually solves 80% of what you're dealing with. And so that's just, you have to kind of experience it over and over to go, well, this is just the way it goes. You zoom in and then you can zoom out with the future.
Okay. That you're really helping me here because now you're making me understand that it isn't about solving all these problems that we're having necessarily. It's about designing the future state, the optimal, you know, future state that we want to have for this particular product family.
Why is work not flowing? I
Yeah.
mean, that's really what the current state is about. Why is it not flowing? Why is it so hard? Why does it not feel good when you go home at the end of the day? What, like, though, that's what you're trying to get clear on. And then decide which elements of that lack of flow are the highest priorities to work on.
Well, Michael, I'm going to turn this on you because I'm curious now because Karen's got all this experience as a facilitator, which is different than somebody working within a big manufacturing company. You've done this many times. Is that where people tend to get stuck as they go too far and they get into the details, the weeds too much, and there's no one to pull them back out?
Well, it was my comment earlier was, that interim state. I think, process engineers, supply chain people, they want that, 3 month, maybe even 30-day window. I can go solve some small problems and losing track of the bigger problem, the flow, the pull, and you can draw them on the map and then look away and say, yeah, but I got to solve, this minuscule problem right here. And so to keep them aligned and to keep them focused on a true future state is really the challenge. I love the outside facilitator angle. You command a certain attention. They may listen differently. Internally, people are battling their day jobs, their priorities, their metrics. It's easy to get pulled back to that. What difference can I make in this value stream tomorrow? And forget about that future state. So that's been my experience is that they might see it, they might get it on the board, but then it's right back to hey, today's problems today.
Yep.
Well, the other thing on the charter, again, this charter is really, really powerful.
Very
And,
important.
Yeah,
and
I could see why.
Yeah.
the other thing that's on the charter is quantification of a desired future state. And so you're putting numbers to the place that you'd like to go. Now,
Yeah.
rarely, but occasionally, the current state numbers are not known. And that's because of any number of reasons. But sometimes data has never been collected. Sometimes it's tough to pull out of the system. There's all kinds of
Yeah.
reasons. But the future state, like, what should it be is the question. And it's like, even if we don't know the current state yet, what should it be? And are you there yet? And they'll go, like, no, no, not even close. So it's like, all right, well, then let's go with that as our version one of the success factor is going to be that we're going to go for this. Now, if we find that in 6 to 9 months, we've overturned so many stones and there's so many worms underneath them, there's no way we can possibly clean it up in 6 to 9 months, then you have to, pick your priorities. But and we go back to the charter over and over and over during mapping. It's like, okay, good idea, good problem. Is it going to get us to this number? And holding
Yeah.
up the charter, like, is it going to get us there? Well, what's going to be easiest to get us there? That's also not going to create another problem, and it's going to hopefully make quality better and safety better and all those things. And so, um, those future state metrics are really helpful as you're going through future state design.
Yeah. Yeah. We had one plant manager that really was great at managing that cadence, that 6 to 9 months, keep the metrics in view, and then always saying, hey, we're not done after this. There's another future state. And he was very diligent about doing that. And so then my role as a coach was more about just helping manage the projects, getting stuff
Right.
done, dotting the I's, crossing the T's. I didn't have to worry about that vision. I didn't have to worry about pulling him out of the weeds. So it was
Yeah.
really a great partnership. And that went on for many years. I think he had I don't know, 6 or 7 year run of
Mm,
9 month improvement things. And when you strung those all together, by the way, it was amazing how close,
yeah.
he was getting to that ideal state. And you wouldn't have seen that within any given map.
You're
It
right.
took that many years to actually get there, but he stuck with it. He was in leadership for that long at that location.
Yeah, I mean, we could get going on that whole problem where leaders aren't there long enough to make any
To
dents
follow
and
through, yeah.
yeah, and follow through. Yeah, and then the new leader comes in with new priorities and yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'll keep us flowing here because I like where we're headed here. We've talked about the charter, mapping the current state, mapping the future state. What happens next after you map that future state?
Transformation plan. So for that, taking the discoveries from or taking the future state design and starting to make it real, so that you're going to get things done. So the transformation plans that we use are very simple. They have, rows, and again, Excel rows. Each row is a project to be, a problem to be solved, or a project to be implemented and, executed. And, very often there's some kind of major IT block that needs to be done. And we don't frame it as a problem to be solved. We just like, you just need to fix the software so that it does what it's supposed to do, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But for process design stuff and workflow, it's typically a problem to be solved. So every line has an owner. Ideally, all the owners are on the mapping team, not outside the mapping team, so that they have a vested interest because they've been through this whole process, like being on jury duty. You bonded over this drama, and so ideally they have that. There's a plan owner. There are plan meetings, status meetings to check in, make sure that and there's a Gantt-ish chart. It's very high level, but there's a Gantt-ish chart on anything that has dependencies where they have to finish one project before they can start the next one. Those are indicated. And there's, a status column for, is it on target? Is it off target? And what percent complete is it? And so that plan manager, it sounds like, Mike, you were the plan manager in many cases, that you would
Yep.
be driving that and facilitating the sessions to see if there's obstacles in the way. And, occasionally there's a line item that actually drops off the plan, because you think one thing when you're in mapping, and then when you get into the real world lab and you're starting to mess with stuff, sometimes a need goes away and sometimes a new need arises. And so the plan isn't in cement at the end of the mapping activity. It's firm-ish, but you have to be responsive to conditions that arise. So is that what you did, Mike, when you were,
Yeah. Very, very similar. Again, the best part of that story was having that vision not changing, that future state, the progress moving forward, and somebody removing barriers, um, and keeping us out of the weeds. So yeah, there's definitely a project management type role, a
Mhm.
lot of accountability. Hey, what if something is slipping behind? How do you pull the help chain? Just with any kind of project. But here you're more laser focused, with all these interlocking parts that have to work together to get to that future state.
Yeah, and I might also mention, back to the metrics for a second, usually teams are afraid to be bold with their predictions for the future state metrics. And,
Mhm.
let's just say it's inventory turns. You want to increase inventory turns, you want to shrink lead time, you want to um, just have more uptime for equipment for whatever reason. It could be changeover related, it could be maintenance related, it could be
Maintenance, yeah.
like those are the goals that often go on a charter, and they're good goals. But what we try to do is project what that means to the business. So if you keep those lines humming, if you're able to get those turns up, like, what does that do to cash flow? What does that do to revenue? What does that do to operational expenses? What does that do? And so we're always trying to understand, we're not trying to rearrange the chairs on the Titanic. We're trying to build a new ship here.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes hard, and that's why you need senior leaders also, by the way. If you get people too low in the organization, not only will they not have the vision to understand, they haven't ever had the authority to do any of this work that's really big. And so you do involve them in mapping. When you're walking, you're talking with the operators, you're learning what their work experiences are like, you're learning what they see as obstacles. You are involving the front lines, but the team is biased toward the future state design. And so you need people with authority and vision, and can say yes
Mm.
to things. And if you get too low, and we see a lot of teams are way too low in the organization, but Karen, you always say involve the front lines. I go, yes, after the value stream out, then you involve the front lines. And you involve them during the walks, like I just said, but your team has to be biased toward having the authority to say yes to big ideas.
The big stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and that
Well,
ties back to our conversation last time, Brian, about growth. Focus on the big things and move fast, and you create the capacity for growth. I think this transformation methodology, as we said, enables growth. That
Mhm.
should be one of the things on your radar that you're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, they're a growing market for sure.
Yeah.
And I really like what you're saying here, Karen, because this is often the problem I've seen in manufacturing with employees is they get too granular on the benefits.
Mhm.
And like we need to speak in the terms that the CFO is going to understand when they need to approve that capital expenditure.
Yeah.
Well, shoot, we're going to be able to, increase, production by 10%, 15%, and what that means for the business, return on cash flow. I really like that. I guess for a lot of people, though, that's not a skill set that you naturally develop in manufacturing unless you're leading a division, you're responsible for a P&L. How does someone gain those type of skills to be able to think that way? Are there, and I guess this is kind of setting you up, but are there any resources that you've made available through your academy, around this topic?
Not yet. We for 2024, we have a short list of high priority courses, and one of them is quantifying improvement. So that will touch on this. The other one's facilitation techniques, so that will also be relevant for
Perfect.
project management's launching in about 3 weeks. No more than 3 weeks. It might even be 2 weeks from now. So that'll be our first kind of the traditional things you think about with lean. Project management isn't necessarily one of them. It seems like it's this other thing, but we're making it very much a part of the lean skill set that's needed. Um, or operational excellence or business performance improvement or whatever you want to call it. So wait, I'm sorry. You asked me about okay, how does one learn? So, we teach a lot when we're on site with the client. We're constantly teaching them how we're doing what we're doing. We give people the spreadsheets with all the formulas in it and say, reverse engineer this. The next time you have to do this, look at the formulas. And if you need help, call us and we'll help you figure out what we did. And so there's that. I mean, I think you have to do real world work. It's like watching the math teacher and going, "Oh, I got this." And then you get home and you're starting to do your homework. You're like, "I don't have this." I don't know what I'm doing. So you need to just practice. And then the other thing with when it comes to money, the other thing I will say is that teams often don't take the step that they need to take and make sure the CFO or controller or both agree with what they're deeming to be of value. And what I mean by that is that 50% of our clients over 30 years of doing this have very much agreed with free capacity as being something worth measuring and honored in the company. And 50% of CFOs have said, I don't give a hoot. It's not changing my bottom line.
Nope.
And so you have to make sure that you're not losing credibility out of the gate because you're suggesting that freeing capacity is a valuable thing when the CFO doesn't agree with that. So that's one thing I would say. And again, that's back to the charter. That's
Yeah.
part of the chartering process is making sure leaders are aligned with how do you measure success? Is freeing capacity a success factor or not? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Well, it's exciting. I'm
Karen,
glad you're adding those modules to the academy. I can't wait to see them.
Yeah.
Those are lost fundamentals, in my opinion. So, more power to you, bringing those back to the forefront.
Well, there's a reason why they haven't been launched in the first 4 years. They're going to be tough to write.
Well, they
It's
are. We didn't say it
yeah,
was easy.
yeah, exactly. But that's about important.
yeah, Karen, the theme here underlying, a lot of this transformation or this methodology, there's a lot of selling that has to happen within the organization. And I think that's the other key to maybe consider if you're thinking about doing this is you need to have somebody who's really good at selling internally on your team.
Yeah, I call it lobbying a lot, and
Lobbying.
But Mike uses a word that is now my new favorite word, advocate. You have to become an advocate.
Advocate.
And I think people respond to that a little better than selling. I use selling all the time too, and improvement people all the time are like, sell? That's not my thing. I'm like, well, you better learn. And Dan Pink had that one book, To Sell As Human.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that was a good book. It didn't sell as well as like Drive, and I forget the one more recently that sold really well. It didn't do quite as well, but it's a great book
Mhm.
about you're selling when you're lobbying for what movie to go see with your friends or loved ones. That is selling. And that's influencing. That's, getting people to see things through your perspective. It's not browbeating. It's, having honey and getting the flies to come. It's too hot. there's so much technique there. So that also will be a challenging course, but I do like that idea, Brian. Thank you.
Yeah.
And still being humble and saying, "What do you think?"
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Yep.
It's that balance.
yeah,
I'm gonna start
exactly.
using that word. Yeah, advocate is a great word.
It is a great word. Thank you, Mike Osterling.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Well, Karen, as we wrap up here, you mentioned the Karen Martin. It's the TKMG Academy. Is that right? .com.
Yeah.
And,
tkmgacademy.com.
and then the name of your book, in case people want to go out and read it and try and implement this at their company or hire you, maybe. What was the name of your most recent book?
Oh, Clarity First.
Oh, Clarity First. And then there's Value Stream Mapping, which was the one you shared.
Right. There's
Yeah.
that one. And then there was the Outstanding Organization also. So,
Okay.
We'll have to do
there's
we
there's
got to do
five.
another episode on clarity first. That's
I tell you, clarity is so important, and it's really tough for a lot of organizations.
it is.
Really tough. There's a lot of psychology involved. Yep.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
We'll save that for another episode.
Love to. You guys are fun to talk with. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
much.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for the time today. You helped me understand value stream mapping much more than I did before. So
And
hopefully,
we've got a course on that too.
great. Well,
And it's
So much
good.
but we have it's 2-part course that I teach. So
you'll
Yeah.
you'll have to share some coupon codes for Voices of Manufacturing listeners.
all right, let's do it right now.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Tell me what you want the code to be, and what's the code? What % off do they get?
I don't know. How about VOM for Voices of Manufacturing?
VOM, okay.
And then you tell me what's a fair percentage for our audience.
I don't know. How loyal was your audience? Do they deserve more?
Oh, they're
Yeah,
the
they
best
do.
audience in manufacturing. Yeah.
Well, they're hungry
All right.
to learn.
I think 15? Is
Yeah,
that
that sounds. Let's do it. VOM 15. How about that?
VOM 15?
I
Okay.
love it.
All right.
we'll-
I'm gonna go make it right now.
Perfect. We'll include this in the listener notes when we go live with this episode.
Okay, that sounds
Yep.
good. You know what? Let's make a VOM 20.
VOM 20. Okay.
Why? Because VOM, it looks like I5. It started reminding me of a bad word. So VOM 20.
Okay. Great. All right, Sharon. Well, thanks again for your time and your generous offer for our listeners to check out your courses at the Karen Martin Academy.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
mgacademy.com. Thank you. And great. Thank you so much for having me on, you guys. I'm glad that we waited a year. And, it's just always lovely talking with you both. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Great, thanks.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Voices of Manufacturing podcast with Brian Salee and Michael Mullenberg. This show is brought to you by Dazuki, the premier digital transformation solution that allows manufacturers to standardize operations. Our website, where you can listen to our episodes and find tons of helpful resources, is dazuki.com. Sign up for our monthly newsletter so you'll be the first to know about new episodes. That's dazuki.com, and join us in creating the front line of the future.